I'm Brittany, this is Shenwei, and welcome to Gaywatch, where we watch gay things. Today, we are continuing reading Volume 3 of Guardian, the final volume of a trilogy. We are on page 175 for Chapter 14. We will be reading all the way through Chapter 18 today. We will be stopping at Chapter 19, because it just so happens to break up very evenly today. We usually read for a couple of hours and get through about 40-50 pages, but in order to finish the volume by the end of the week, we are having to read more like 60 pages. So it will probably go a little bit past where we usually stop, which is at 5 p.m., and probably get more somewhere around the middle between 5 o'clock and 5:30. We usually only take one break in the middle, but since the stream is a little bit longer, I'm going to experiment today, and we'll be taking two smaller breaks. So we'll take one in about 45 minutes, and then the second one about 45 minutes after that. And then the idea being that it's all broken up into more even chunks, but then also that gives me and my throat, as I am recovering from a bit of a cold, more opportunities to stop and make sure that I have hot tea to help out the throat. So, previously, Zhao and Shenwei have essentially made a deal to live one life together, a very mortal life, before just dying together. If they're going to have, as opposed to eternity separate, they're going to die together. Two, larger than life is not what I'm going for. Two essentially immortal souls are agreeing to be mortal if it means they get the privilege and honor of sharing a single lifetime. If I talk about how meaningful that is, I'm going to cry. And we're only about 5 minutes into this stream. I can't talk about how beautiful that is. I don't have the words. Maybe I'll find the words by Friday when we finish, but I don't have it right now. I just wanted to hammer that home. That's what's happening. I'm concerned because we got that established and we still have all of this to go. So if we've already decided that we're just going to live in marital bliss until the day we die, then what's all this about? What's this? This is opportunity to hurt my feelings. That's all it is. And she knows it. Priest knows this. We're already unhinged. Okay. Page 175 for chapter 14. Go Cheng Chung had accepted a ghost's request on impulse, but now he was anxiously pulling his hair. But how are we going to find her? After scrolling through his phone for a while, he found a large group photo in which none of the faces were really in focus. Next, he spent 5 minutes thinking and finally came up with a simple, if rough, idea. How about I crop the photo and post a missing person bulletin online and in the paper? That would give the kidnapper plenty of time to sell her to a wholesaler and for them to resell her at retail, Chushu just said. My advice? Go look for her at Walmart. It'd be faster. Go Cheng Chung gave him a completely lost look. Fine. Tell me her address, said Chushu. Let's figure out how she'd get from there to Dragon City. Completely lost look. The implication, at least for my brain, means puppy dog eyes. He's just a lost puppy, and Chushu, who has a soft spot in his armor for Go Cheng Chung lost puppy, relents. And that's why they're fantastic. I just thought I'd make that clear. Go Cheng Chung rattled off the province and administrative region. Of course she doesn't live in the city, he clarified. She lives in... damn it, I didn't look it up. If it was Sui or not. I'm gonna rely on that, though. in Sui Village under the jurisdiction of a middle-of-nowhere county. It's one of about 100 villages in that county. To get to Dragon City, she could walk to the county, then take the 8-hour bus from the mountain to the administrative center, then take a train. The train's unlikely, Chushuja interrupted. They'd need to check her ID for a train ride. And even if the kidnapper would actually choose the train, we don't even know if she's got an ID to begin with. She wouldn't exactly steal her household registry book and run off with it. As he spoke, Chushuja turned his computer on and started checking online long-distance bus schedules, looking for buses that ran between the prefecture-level city Go Cheng Chung had mentioned to Dragon City. He also looked up the route. Almost all the buses from that direction take National Highway 220, and the trip takes about 30 hours. If that kid ran away yesterday, she'll probably be arriving in the city soon. Go Cheng Chung's eyes shone. Right, Chuga, you're so smart. If we go wait at the highway exit, maybe we'll run into her. Chushuja glanced at his wrist and saw that it was almost 11 p.m. How long would they have to wait? He thought to himself that there must be something wrong with Go Cheng Chung. Seeing how elated he was, Chushuja couldn't help but rain on his parade. Human trafficking isn't our jurisdiction. Can't you just go home and sleep? You don't think before you speak, and now you've just casually agreed to a ghost's demands. Go Cheng Chung picked up on the complaint in his tone. Caught off guard, he rubbed his sleeves uneasily. Chuga, how about you go home and rest? I can just drive over on my own. Thank you for your help. I never would have thought of the bus route thing myself. It was all so annoyingly submissive that Chushuja's temper flared, and his expression darkened. Go Cheng Chung's instincts told him that he'd done something wrong, so he immediately bent over to apologize. And I'm sorry you had to help me carry stuff today, I really am. How about I treat you to dinner when you're free? Not this boy tripping into, just like he trips into everything else, tripping into a dinner date with Chushuja. This tracks. I don't know why I'm so sidelined by this, but because it tracks. It makes too much sense. With a humph, Chushuja picked up his jacket and walked out. Go Cheng Chung lagged behind, not saying anything. When Chushuja reached the door and saw that Go Cheng Chung wasn't following, he glanced back. What are you waiting for? He demanded. Aren't you the one who wanted to find her? Get your ass in gear. Go Cheng Chung instantly blossomed from a frost-wilted eggplant to a freshly watered sunflower and eagerly ran after him. Let me read that again. Go Cheng Chung instantly blossomed from a frost-wilted eggplant to a freshly watered sunflower and eagerly ran after him. The duo drove Go Cheng Chung's car to the highway exit to wait for a bus with a license plate from the girl's home province. If they saw one, they'd pull it over and conduct a search among the passengers. They spent the entire night staking out the highway exit. Stakeout. A stakeout. I wish that wasn't just a sentence summary. I would like a more detailed account of their stakeout, please. Lunar New Year was over, but spring hadn't yet made its way to Dragon City, or at least spring temperatures hadn't. In the mornings and evenings it was still below freezing outside, and spending time out there would quickly turn someone to ice. Under the circumstances, Go Cheng Chung and Chushuja had little choice but to stay huddled in the car. Sitting in the vehicle quickly made Go Cheng Chung sleepy. Am I getting my wish? I always speak too soon. Speaking of speaking too soon. More than once, Chushuja saw his chin droop almost to his chest, but each time, Go Cheng Chung would suddenly shake himself awake, briskly rub his face, and get out of the car to glance in both directions. Once he verified that no buses had passed by, he'd let out a sigh of relief, wrap his coat tighter around himself, and take a quick stroll around in the night wind, hoping to wake himself a little. He only returned to the car to warm up after his entire body felt numb. Somehow, Chushuja didn't find it annoying to see him constantly getting in and out of the car. He just watched pensively. In general, the Corpse King spent very little time focused on Go Cheng Chung, so until now he hadn't fully realized that something felt off. There was the There was what Da Ching had said. Go Cheng Chung was quiet about his good deeds, never drawing attention or looking for any kind of reward, and as a result his merits increased exponentially. But even given that, how old was Go Cheng Chung? Barely 20? And yet he was covered in more merits than you could see through. Collecting that many should have required saving the world 7 or 8 times. At that moment, another long-distance bus approached. As soon as it was close enough to see its license plate, Go Cheng Chung vaulted out of the car as if he'd been flooded with adrenaline. He grabbed his ID and stood in the middle of the road, waving his arms to stop the vehicle. So naive, Chu Shuja mumbled. Keeping an eye on Go Cheng Chung's back, he called Da Ching. Hey, Nightcat, you're still up, right? If so, I have something to ask you. Da Ching was in the middle of a dream. In it, he was floating on the ocean, holding and munching happily on a huge whale that would surely be enough to keep him fed for 6 months or a year. But he'd only taken 2 bites when the Leviathan suddenly launched itself out of the water, splashing him in the face with bitterly cold water. Jolting awake, Da Ching found that Sung Zun was holding a chilly receiver to his face and beaming. Cat slutterer. Phone. At this point, Sung Zun was clearly aware that slutterer was a rude word. He'd completely stopped saying it ages ago, except with Da Ching. Sung Zun, the troublemaker, kept cheerfully saying it to the cat, and even managed to pronounce it more and more like slut. The cat slutterer looked up extremely cross. He pressed his ear to the phone, only to hear Chu Shuja's voice. Fuck off, old corpse, Da Ching grumbled. Are you looking to die? Chu Shuja wasn't about to let him get away with his bad habit of spewing insults every time he opened his mouth. You fall asleep as soon as you finish eating. If you're not careful, you'll be in a new weight class by the end of the year. By then, not even a dog would be attracted to you, never mind a little female cat. Aren't you afraid of high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and diabetes, old man? The cat slutterer gouged his claws into the desk, leaving a row of marks. Sung Zun watched calmly, and then floated away, hugging his books to his chest. If you have something to discuss, hurry and spit it out. If you don't, I'm dismissing the court. Chu Shuja, what do you want in the middle of the night? I just wanted to ask, have you ever seen orange merit? Of course, Da Ching huffed. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and purple. I've seen all the colors of the rainbow. When you collect all 7, you can summon Shenron to perform the acrobatic trick of tying himself into a bow in midair. I'm being serious, Chu Shuja lowered his voice, glancing out at the parked bus. Most of the time it's white, not orange, but then sometimes it flashes like flame as if it's on fire. Da Ching turned serious. Fire? Where did you see this? On Go Cheng Chung. Impossible, Da Ching said decisively. I'm familiar with what you're talking about. That's no small amount of merit. It's huge. Do you know what great merits entail? You can't earn them no matter how many old ladies you help cross the street or how much you donate to a few mountain region schools. These days, all living beings' merits and sins are written in the Book of Life and Death, meaning they're all recorded by the merit brush made from the Great Merit Tree. Great merits are on a completely different level. I've never seen it myself, but I've been told that back when Nuwa created humans, she appeared to be surrounded by fire. Those are great merits blessed by the heavens. Then what the fuck did the best boy... Okay. Chu Shuja froze. Go Cheng Chung was already getting off the bus. Even from this distance, he was clearly hanging his head in dejection, another dead end, most likely. Lowering his voice, Chu Shuja quickly asked, And you're sure Xiaoguo is human? Of course he's human, Da Ching said. Wang Zheng even has a copy of his ID. I want to find his proof of birth, the kind that says X year, X month, X day, a live male infant was born, the kind you get from a hospital, said Chu Shuja. Huh? Da Ching exclaimed. Holy shit, humans are such weirdos. They have something like that? Enough bullshit. I'm in the middle of something, so I have to go. Remember to look into it for me. Chu Shuja hung up just before Go Cheng Chung got in the car. He seemed a little wilted. Despite the answer being obvious, Chu Shuja asked, No luck, huh? Go Cheng Chung nodded in confirmation. After a moment, Chu Shuja carefully said, It's possible that I was wrong. Maybe they would take the train, or even wait here longer instead of heading here right away. Maybe we should go home for now? Staying up all night made Go Cheng Chung's already slightly slow brain seem even more sluggish. He rubbed his face forcefully, then said in a very small voice, "Sorry, Chuga. How about you take the car and head home? Once I've found her, I'll take a taxi home." "What, are you planning to stand out here all night and freeze to death?" Chushuja gave it a moment's thought. "Don't worry, you made a promise to a ghost, but it's fine. I can handle an earthbound spirit with no cultivation." Shaking his head resolutely, Go Cheng Chung turned to get out of the car. The instant his back was facing Chushuja, Chushuja pulled his hand out of his pocket where he'd been hiding it and slapped a talisman onto the back of Go Cheng Chung's neck. "What are you?" he snapped. "Why are you possessing—" Oh, sorry. Emphasis. Completely wrong emphasis. One moment, please. Let me try that again. "What are you?" he snapped. "Why are you possessing this mortal?" I hadn't even thought of that. Go Cheng Chung's limbs felt like they'd been filled with lead. He wanted to turn back and ask Chushuja what was going on, but his neck was completely stiff. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't move it. His awareness seemed to float out of his body. From a peculiar third-person perspective, he found himself staring at his own laughably positioned body and Chushuja's serious expression. Chushuja frowned, looking up at Go Cheng Chung's soul where it floated in midair. That was a genuine mortal soul, and it corresponded perfectly to the body. There was nothing out of the ordinary. In other words, the soul he'd smacked out of the body with his talisman was truly Go Cheng Chung himself. "So you really are Go Cheng Chung." Floating there, Go Cheng Chung wanted to say, "Chuka, what are you doing?" But when he opened his mouth, it was as if he'd been muted. Or, no, it was like he was in a vacuum where sounds couldn't travel. He had made a sound, but he could only hear his voice through his body. Once the sound left his mouth, it couldn't go anywhere. Chushuja hesitated, then reached out and removed the talisman. Go Cheng Chung felt a huge pressure as an extremely bony hand pressed right down on his soul. It was an awfully strange feeling. Go Cheng Chung couldn't help shivering. Then the sensation of floating was suddenly gone, and his body seemed so heavy that it was almost unfamiliar. Trembling, he looked over to meet Chushuja's scrutinizing gaze. Go Cheng Chung's reaction time was always a little slow, but by this point he understood that his soul had just left his body. According to his understanding, soul leaving body was no different from death, which to him meant that Chushuja had nearly killed him with the talisman. He cowered back against the car door. "Chuga, what's this about?" "Are you human?" Chushuja asked. Go Cheng Chung gaped at him, not at all sure if Chushuja was being literal or insulting. Chushuja tried again. "Let me put it like this. Do you have memories of your parents?" Go Cheng Chung nodded, and Chushuja said, "Apologies. I know about your family. I'm so sorry for your loss." There was no sincerity in his tone. "But I have to ask, were you born to those parents? Can you prove they were your birth parents?" Emotional intelligence wasn't Chushuja's strength. That shortcoming specifically presented itself in the fact that, despite knowing how to talk to people, he chose not to. He thought that was cool, and besides, he was too lazy to make the effort. If this had been Zhao Yunlan he was dealing with, he would have had his ass whipped by now. But Go Cheng Chung was a coward. The question made him feel a little weird, but he didn't show any signs of anger or annoyance. He even considered it carefully before answering. "I look a lot like my uncle and grandpa did when they were younger. My grandpa has kind of high blood pressure, which my dad inherited, and now I'm starting to show early signs of it too. So I think they were my birth parents." "Then were any of your ancestors cultivators?" Chushuja asked. "Ancestors?" Go Cheng Chung paused, confused. "My family doesn't keep a family tree. At most, I can go back 4 generations. Before the Republican era, they could have come from anywhere as refugees." Even if Go Cheng Chung did have some ancestor with special lineage, the last 3 generations were all mortals. At this point, it was obvious how diluted that blood would have become by now. But if what Chushuja was seeing wasn't something Go Cheng Chung had inherited, then the only remaining explanation had to be who he'd been in a prior incarnation. But the Corpse King couldn't see anything unique about Go Cheng Chung's soul. Just then, the headlights of a bus swept across them. Go Cheng Chung immediately forgot about his freakish out-of-body experience and grabbed Chushuja's arm. "Chuga, bus! Bus!" Chushuja paused and set his questions aside for the moment. "Okay, go." Go Cheng Chung stumbled out of the car. The last bus that had passed by had been from the girls' province, but by some great coincidence, this one was too. Go Cheng Chung waved to stop the bus, boarded, and showed the driver his ID. Then he recited his prepared lines about needing to inspect the passengers, much as though he were reporting the news. Routine inspections happened occasionally during the holidays, so the driver took it in stride. He turned and yelled to the busload of passengers, voice ringing out like a bell. Wake up! Wake up! Everyone, please cooperate with the inspection. He's checking your IDs. Chushuja had initially stayed back with the car, but for some reason his heart skipped a beat at that moment. Many people who cultivated had something of a sixth sense. He got out of the car and walked over just in time to see a tiny, skinny girl of 15 or 16 get off the bus behind Go Cheng Chung. She was dressed in a dirty tracksuit, and she held her head so low that her chin nearly touched her chest. This is her? Chushuja asked. Go Cheng Chung nodded. The person who took her is still in the... But before he even finished speaking, there was a clang as someone jumped out of the bus. In reality, there was no proof that the guy had kidnapped the girl. After all, she'd just been quietly riding the bus and had left with Go Cheng Chung voluntarily. It might have been a guilty conscience that made the kidnapper break for it as soon as he heard the word police. But he didn't even make it a few steps before he suddenly tripped on something and fell randomly on his face. He got up and made another attempt to flee, only to hit the ground face first again. When it happened for a third time, Chushuja, the People's Police, finally strolled over and grabbed him by the collar. Cold metal clamped down on the man's wrists. Of course, due to his unique work situation, the Corpse King had never actually used handcuffs before. Unfamiliarity with this particular aspect of the job meant it took him some time to successfully lock the cuffs. Chushuja looked back just in time to see Go Cheng Chung speaking to the young girl in soft, hushed tones, explaining that she shouldn't have run away from home by herself. Then Go Cheng Chung called the number the girl's mother had used, completely forgetting that the woman was now a ghost. Hello, Auntie? Don't worry, we found your child. We'll arrange for someone to bring her back tomorrow. After that, he passed the phone to the girl as though it was the most natural thing in the world. Your mom's out of her mind with worry. She called me in the middle of the night and asked me to find you. Here, speak to her. The girl was going through her teenage rebellion stage. She'd recognized Go Cheng Chung, but to her, he was just some teacher or playmate who taught her for a month during a summer break in middle school. Her current attitude toward him wasn't great to begin with. She seemed disobedient and disinterested and had probably ignored everything Go Cheng Chung had said to her, until now. At his last few words, she went utterly still. Then she looked up at him suddenly and, moving like a marionette, accepted the phone with shaking hands. Hello? The person on the other end of the line was silent for a moment, but then, via electromagnetic waves, the familiar village dialect reached her ears despite the barrier of death. Swear, it really, truly was her late mother's familiar voice. Tears immediately began to stream down the girl's face. Mom? Through the phone, her mother said, Don't cry, Swear. Don't cry. Listen to Go Lasha and come home tomorrow. You've gone too far for Mom to keep up. When I can't see you, I get worried. There, at the entrance to the National Highway entering Dragon City, a young girl in an old-school uniform finally started to wail, piercing the vast, hazy night with a grief beyond words. Chushuja wasn't good at dealing with these situations. He'd meant to just capture the kidnapper and go. But when he unintentionally glanced at Go Cheng Chung again, he once more saw that thick, heavy glow of merit, gleaming like firelight. This time, the firelight seemed even brighter. For an instant, Chushuja thought something on Go Cheng Chung's body was burning. He rubbed his eyes firmly, and when he looked up again, the light was already gone. The end of the chapter! Fucking... We're on page 187. Like, we're not about to start chapter 15. We're on page 187 for chapter 15. Cruel and unusual. As the sun peeked over the horizon, signaling that the little ghosts of 4 Bright Avenue were off to work for the night, a worried Da Ching made his way to Zhao Yunlan's place, plump body swaying as he ran. Upon arriving, he jumped onto the window ledge in the hallway and launched from there, pouncing fiercely at Zhao Yunlan's door. His forepaws pressed the doorbell with perfect precision. Button pushed, Da-Ching turned into a squashed flat pancake of a cat and slid down to the floor. The doorbell rang. When Zhao Yunlan was home alone, he sometimes played games with earphones in. To make sure he didn't miss it when someone was at the door, he'd chosen a particularly earth-shattering tone for the bell. At a single push of the button, the soul-stirring song, "The Hottest Ethnic Trend," played in its entirety, loudly enough to be heard from outside. As I bumped the mic. But this time, even after the song had played for a while, there was still no answer. Were they still not back? The black cat paced anxiously before the door and unconsciously started chasing his own tail, turning into a black tornado on the spot. Not about to give up, he decided to try again. He sprang. Just as his front paws latched onto the hallway window ledge and his back legs flailed in midair while he struggled to pull himself up, the door opened from within with a faint click. Startled, the cat lost his grip and slipped off. He rolled where he landed, looking over with widened, round eyes. Upon seeing who had answered the door, he lost his freshly regained balance. His paws slipped on the shiny floor and his heavy jowls quivered from the fall. But then, very circumspect, Da-Ching sheathed his claws and sat up properly. Chest puffed out and stomach sucked in, he meowed lightly. "My lord." With a flick of Shenwei's fingers, the interminable doorbell went silent. Da-Ching couldn't help holding his neck up stiffly. He swallowed with great difficulty as his gaze happened to fall on Shenwei's clothes. Clothes that seemed far too familiar. That shirt was unmistakably Zhao Yunlan's. Once again, filed under things that should be fairly predictable, and yet here I am. I couldn't have lost my place that easy. That's a lie. I lose my place that easily all the time. Zhao Yunlan, the absolute weirdo, liked to wear his sleeves rolled up. He always made a point of asking the laundry workers to iron his shirts with the sleeves that way so they would fold neatly. All unwilling, Da-Ching found a whole sequence of events popping into his head. First, the two would have taken off their clothes, and then... The black cat lowered his large round head, trying to get his mind out of the gutter. "What is it?" Shenwei asked. "Oh, I just came to see if Director Zhao was back or not. We've all been so worried about him since he jumped into the Huangquan." Very quietly, Shenwei said, "He's back, but he's resting now. If you need something, you can leave a message with me. I'll pass it on once he wakes up." "Exhaust him, did you?" Da-Ching immediately grasped the situation, began to make a quick retreat. I won't disturb you any longer then. There's nothing important. Please just remind our boss to write up our work schedule for the new year and our department's New Year speech. That's all. Don't let me keep you. I'll be on my way." "Wait a moment." Shenwei's smile seemed a little embarrassed. Politely, he said, "I have a favor to ask of you." Da-Ching, sensible cat that he was, darted back at once. Head raised high, he said, "Just say the word." 10 minutes later, the door to the breakfast shop downstairs was pushed open by an outrageously fat cat. The cat's face was much too round, and his eyes were almost completely obscured by the fat, giving him a somewhat vicious look. A waitress nearly tripped over him and started yelling at once, "Hey, how did this cat get in? Get it out! Hurry and get it out!" The large black cat raised his head, leveling a contemptuous gaze at her. Then he jumped right onto the service counter and knocked on it with his front paw. Astonished, the cashier behind the counter watched as the cat spat out a piece of paper. The cashier shakily opened a note, which turned out to read, in very tidy handwriting, "Half a liter of soy milk, 1 basket of steamed buns, 3 fried dough sticks. Please put them in a sturdy bag. You'll find the money on the cat's neck. Please take what's needed and put any change back in the same spot. Thank you." He sent the cat out for breakfast supplies. The cashier looked up, trying to locate the cat's neck by sight. The cat rolled his eyes and lifted his head, revealing a collar beneath his double chin. The cashier found 30 yuan tucked in there, hidden under the plush fur. "Everyone, look at this." The cashier's voice rang out loudly. "This is incredible. Even cats know how to buy things now." Daching, who had to endure being stared at by everyone present, was so mortified and furious that he yearned for death. These stupid humans. Scene break. The sound of the door woke Zhao Yunlan. He opened his eyes. Who? Your cat. Shenwei closed the door. He came to see you. I asked him to go buy breakfast. Sleep a little more. As he spoke, he gently nudged Zhao Yunlan back into the blankets before tucking his hands back in. Then he bent down and kissed Zhao Yunlan on the forehead. With a fingertip, he smoothed out Zhao Yunlan's brow, furrowed from awakening. Once Zhao Yunlan's breathing was even again, Shenwei walked to the window and looked at the plants on the windowsill, which were half dead with neglect. He cupped a pot with his hands, and milky white light radiated from his palms. The sickly plant responded like the earth tasting sweet rain after a long drought. It quickly became fresh and radiant. Its stem straightened. Soon it stood, graceful and elegant once more. Shenwei quietly washed the spray bottle, then carefully misted the leaves. The whole thing about this entire story has to do with two incredible, immortal beings juxtaposed against the most beautifully intimate and mundane life. And something about that really, like, I'm speechless. Priest found a way to encapsulate what it feels like to do that, to spend your life with someone in a completely unique, or at least unique to me, way of expressing that. And as someone who is spending their life with the love of their life, I can't talk about it. But I can attest that the emotional truths that seem to be uncovered in this story are indeed, like, this is the experience. Because finding that kind of life partner feels like it feels like cosmos. It feels like a much bigger, grander thing. But you're living such a lovely little mundane life, taking care of each other. But it feels like you're two immortal souls who have found each other in the cosmos. God, I hope that made sense. Most residents of Dragon City were already back at work, and the streets were once again busy at rush hour. Through a crack in the curtains, Shenwei glanced outside. At the far reaches of the busy world, even further than the sky's edge, a wisp of black drifted up from beneath the ground. But one glance was all Shenwei spared it. Seeming to turn a blind eye, he looked away again and carried on with his task. The great seal was about to break, but there was an unfamiliar tranquility in his heart. His entire body felt lazy and relaxed, as though even dying at that very moment would be no big deal. It was nearly noon by the time Zhao Yunlan woke again, this time awakened by the fragrance of the hot soy milk that Shenwei had placed by his bedside. He stared at the creamy drink for a while, then suddenly rolled over and sat up. What did you say this morning? You told Daching to do what? Shenwei, wearing glasses while he looked through a handwritten lesson plan, calmly said, buy breakfast. Dumbfounded, Zhao Yunlan just sat there with an indescribable expression, possibly imagining Da Qing wandering the streets as the protagonist of Nobody's Boy, Da Qing, then gave his head a firm shake. He rested his elbows on his knees, pressed his hands to his forehead, and started to laugh. "What's so funny?" asked Shenwei. "I was just thinking how I've done well in the romance department for half my life, only to be defeated and sealed beneath your mountain, like the Monkey King sealed under Wujia Mountain. You're so powerful, Comrade Shenwei." Zhao Yunlan's voice dripped with sarcasm, but at whose expense was unclear. Either way, Shenwei pretended not to notice. He kept smiling virtuously. "Hi-oh, babe, please, I'm begging you, drop the act, or at least stop acting like that. My mind can't take it." Shenwei's innocent facade was making Zhao Yunlan's teeth ache. He went to the bathroom to wash up, one hand pressed to his waist, and slammed the door behind him. Afterward, as Zhao Yunlan was about to take out his frustrations on his food, Zhuhong called. And actually, because I probably should have stopped at the scene break, because it's right around the time to take our first break. So we're stopping real quick as we get into Zhuhong's phone call towards the bottom of 191. I really should have stopped at the scene break. That was my own fault. So we're going to take a quick break. I am going to go grab some more tea and I think it's time for me to take some more medicine as well. So I will be right back as quickly as I can to keep going while we're in the middle of this scene. One moment, please. And we are back. So, that's not the chat at all. There you guys are. Alrighty. Move that over so I can get it all settled. Alrighty. So, we were on the bottom of page 191, and Zhuhong had just called. So, afterward, as Zhao Yunlan was about to take out his frustrations on his food, Zhuhong called. "Hello, Director Zhao? Da Qing says you're back. Are you all right?" Zhao Yunlan bit into half a fried dough stick. "What's up?" "Remember how Lin Jing went to check on that life borrowing case? His ticket back was for last night. I was going to call him after midnight and see where he was, but his phone was out of range. At first I thought it was because the signal's so bad in the mountains from all the tunnels there, but that train arrived on time hours ago and he still hasn't shown up. And when I called just now, I still got a not in service area message." Zhao Yunlan's chewing slowed. "And he hasn't contacted the office?" "No." Zhao Yunlan's brow creased. The Special Investigation Department's rules stated that, whether they were just evaluating a case or officially starting an investigation, no one worked alone. There always had to be at least 2 people. Da Qing counted, of course. On the rare occasion when special circumstances forced someone to act solo, they had to contact the office at least twice a day to keep everyone advised of their location. Lin Jing might not be the most reliable when it came to the little things, but he very rarely messed up anything important. He wouldn't spontaneously decide to go AWOL. Zhao Yunlan hung up and took his own stab at calling Lin Jing, but unsurprisingly got the same message. He pulled out a soul guarding order and wrote Lin Jing's name on it with a chopstick dipped in soy milk. The soul guarding order acted like a compass. First it wavered from left to right, then settled on one direction. A fine thread of red extended slowly from Lin Jing's name, but the further it reached, the duller the color grew. By the time it reached under the table, the line had turned nearly gray. Then it snapped. Shen Wei, who had been immersed in his lesson plan, looked up and exchanged a glance with Zhao Yunlan. Then he bent down and picked up the broken string. At that light touch, it crumbled away like ash. Shen Wei withdrew his hand and carefully sniffed his fingertip. "He should be fine for now. There's no scent of death or anything foul. He's still alive. You just can't reach him. Try not to worry." Zhao Yunlan stuffed the last bun into his mouth without really tasting it, then took a notebook from beneath the table. For all that his life was a completely chaotic, slovenly mess, he was surprisingly precise when it came to time management. There were 3 labeled dividers sticking out from the notebook: urgent, important, and complete. The last section was blank. He'd clearly been in a state of terrible worry and busyness recently, with no time for anything unimportant. The handwriting resembled that of a surgeon who was jumping up and down while writing on a rocket, but with great difficulty Shen Wei was able to read the only 2 items written under urgent. The first item was his own name, and the second read, "Figure out how to evict that stupid bull from Dad's body." The important category had a lengthy list of work-related things, some long and some short. Zhao Yunlan added a checkmark next to Shen Wei, then added a third item under urgent: "Find Lin Jing ASAP." Zhao Yunlan kept writing as he spoke. Lin Jing is actually descended from Bodhidharma. That comes with a footnote. A legendary monk who came to China from the West in the 5th or 6th century, considered the founder of the Chan school of Mahayana Buddhism. Okay. To be honest, none of my other people have a better or cleaner pedigree. Plus, he looks powerful and formidable enough that even his selfies work to ward off evil. He's dependable. He wouldn't stir up shit for no reason. To be honest, he's normally the one I trust the most. In a simple life-lending case like this, I can't help wondering if something fishy's going on, so I have to go take a look. Are you coming? Shen Wei had been too preoccupied lately with his own plans to pay attention to what the people in the soul-guarding order were busy with. Hearing this, he finally raised his gentle gaze from his own checked-off name on the notebook. A trace of a smile curved the corner of his mouth. There was no sign that he minded Zhao Yunlan writing his name as messily as a dog who'd been given a pen. Life borrowing? Zhao Yunlan brought up Wang Zheng's email on his phone. "This is it. Could the great immortal please take a look for us?" Fossil that he was, Shen Wei had never used a smartphone before. His eyes swept over what Wang Zheng had written, and then he looked carefully at the photos of the scene. Being unused to touch screens, he was unfortunately unable to figure it out even after a few attempts. With a glance at Zhao Yunlan, who was currently gulping down his soy milk, he said, "Look away for a second. Don't peek." Holding his palm above the phone screen, Shen Wei made a grabbing motion. The photo of the victim floated out of the screen, hovering in midair like a 3D projection. The visual effect was viscerally shocking. For a moment, it was like the corpse, with its eggplant purple face, was lying right there on the dining table. Well, who needs phones when you can pull that bullshit? Curiosity had kept Zhao Yunlan from obediently looking away, and now he was reaping what he had sown. He choked on a mouthful of soy milk, nearly spitting it all out onto the face of the corpse. This was a stellar example of feudal-era superstitions triumphing over modern technology. Shen Wei carefully examined the corpse's face, then reached out to pinch the eyes. It was as if he'd turned the very air into a 3D touchscreen, enabling himself to zoom in and out on different parts of the image. He may not have died from a life-borrowing spell backfiring. Shen Wei pointed at the corpse's eyes, now magnified to the size of one's palm. Look at his eyes. I just ate. Zhao Yunlan held his stomach in agony. Following Shen Wei's fingertip to the massively magnified eye, he saw that, upon closer inspection, the death-dilated pupil seemed to contain a person's reflection. Zhao Yunlan froze, pressing down on Shen Wei's hand. "Can you zoom in more?" Shen Wei shook his head. "It's just a photo. If I zoom in further, it won't be clear anymore." That's fine." Zhao Yunlan grabbed a tissue from beneath the table and briskly wiped his mouth, then peeled a sticky note from the back of his notebook. He roughly sketched out the shadow's shape. Still better than our shoddy moonlighting tech analyst could do. "Who's that?" Shen Wei asked casually. "Juhong." The dining table's leg creaked, dragging harshly against the floor. Zhao Yunlan felt the chilly gaze land on the back of his exposed neck. Pretending not to notice, he leaned over the table and carefully traced out the thing reflected in the corpse's eyes with a gel pen. But with his back to Shen Wei, he secretly smiled to himself. People used to say that a killer needed to destroy their victim's eyes after the deed was done, or else the victim would retain the silhouette of the last person they saw, allowing the police to solve the crime, Zhao Yunlan said, still tracing. But that's obviously impossible. If it were true, criminal investigators wouldn't need anything but eyeballs to solve cases. Looks like that particular rumor. Art! Ha! This might be the funniest moment they've decided to make art of. One moment. Looks like that particular rumor didn't sprout from nothing, though. Sometimes stories spread in the mortal realm for a reason. What's the shadow in the eyes of the dead, then? When Shen Wei said nothing, Zhao Yunlan looked back at him, eyes smiling. Shen Wei's dark expression made it abundantly clear that he was displeased over Juhong's name coming up. After a few more seconds of silence, he replied coldly, "The bodies of those whose souls are taken by reapers have clean eyes, but if someone's life had yet to reach a natural end, and their soul was stolen by something or someone from beneath the Huangquan, the body's eyes will reflect the shadow of their attacker's origin." Then what do you think this is? Zhao Yunlan asked. How would I know? Oh, what's wrong? Unhappy? Jealous? Zhao Yunlan looked like a cat who'd gotten the cream. I love it when other people are jealous. Won't you let this lord see? Shen Wei answered with silence. We have art of this moment, excuse me. Jeez. No. No. You used to keep up a facade, like a god among men who was above mortal desires. I'm tired of watching you pretend. I get tired on your behalf just from watching. Zhao Yunlan casually stuck his sticky note on the back of one of Shen Wei's lesson plan drafts. Come, Adonis, there's a scanner beside the computer on the desk. Scan this for me and send it to the office. Tell them to find out as much as they can before I get there. Shen Wei accepted it, only to wind up standing stiffly in front of the computer. After turning it on, he just stared at the contraptions in front of him. This god among men essentially only knew how to do two things with computers: turn them on and off and deliver PowerPoint presentations that other people had prepared for him. Why is my face still visible to me? There we go. Everything else was his TA's job. He wasn't even sure which device was the printer and which was the scanner. Zhao Yunlan suddenly came up behind Shen Wei. Wrapping his arms around Shen Wei, he guided his hands through the steps, starting with putting the sketched outline into the scanner. This is like whenever someone teaches somebody else how to, like, putt at golf or swing at golf. You know that moment? Or pool, playing pool, teaching someone how to play pool. This feels like that moment. That was not a complaint. That done, he deliberately blew into Shen Wei's ear under the noise of the machine. You should have said something if you didn't know how to use it. Why didn't you ask your husband to teach you? Shen Wei refused to grant Zhao Yunlan a response. Laughing, Zhao Yunlan copped a feel, squeezing Shen Wei's ass. Shen Wei's face and ears flushed red, but before he could get mad, Zhao Yunlan sidestepped and flipped the calendar on the desk over. He tapped on the email and password written on the back. You at least know how to do this, right? Find the category that says coworkers in the contacts and send the scanned image to them. Next, Zhao Yunlan called for Bright Avenue. Wang Zheng, you're still awake? Thanks for your hard work. Make sure the curtains are closed tightly. Yes, I know. Something's happened to Lin Jing. I'm sending an image over to you, so make sure everyone at the office gets a look. Ideally, someone can figure out what it is. Get Laula to prepare 2 cars. We're leaving for the crime scene in half an hour. At that moment, the ground below the city shook slightly, gently swaying the pendant light in the room. The pendant light in the room? As soon as the tiny earthquake passed, an email notification chimed on both ends of the phone call. Hold on, Director Zhao, Wang Zheng said. There's an email from Lin Jing. On his side of the call, Shen Wei turned to look at him. The person you're looking for seems to have sent an email. Don't hang up, Zhao Yunlan told Wang Zheng. Lin Jing had sent a cell phone video of himself. He was a selfie king, endlessly admiring himself, so he had superb filming skills. But in this video, the camera shook constantly. Lin Jing was breathing harshly and the screen was jostling. He seemed to be running. Then the camera cut to Lin Jing's face. His mouth opened and closed, but there was no sound. Brow creased, Zhao Yunlan lip read with great difficulty. I lost my voice. I can't hear very well. My fingers are stiff. I have a bad feeling. Lin Jing's hand shook, and the camera moved away from his face, pointing toward the buildings across from him. He was at the wellness resort where the life-lending case had occurred. At first glance, the little houses were all beautiful, but Zhao Yunlan realized at once that something was off about them. At that moment, they heard the sound of Lin Jing tapping on the back of the phone. The sound was very loud and a little piercing. It showed just how deathly silent the entire resort was. In front of the camera, Lin Jing wrote in the air, "It's deserted. Not one person's here." Zhao Yunlan noticed that the second joint of his finger was stiff, as unbending as a rock, with a weird bluish-gray hue appearing on it. Then Lin Jing paused. He pointed the camera at his face, then at his ear, and shook his head. Expression solemn, he took out his Buddhist prayer beads, closed his eyes, and started reciting scriptures to force himself to calm down. Next, Lin Jing's eyes flew open, a stunned look crossing his face. He narrowed his eyes with great effort. The camera shook furiously, and then the video ended. At the end there, he probably realized he was losing his vision and hurried to send the video, Zhao Yunlan said, with his vision going. Maybe he made a mistake and scheduled it instead. That could be why we're only seeing it now, or for some reason the email was unable to send until now, Shen Wei finished. Pottery from Ghost. The pottery scene from Ghost is another great example of the having to reach around someone to teach them to do something. That's another good one, Wolf. Thank you. Zhao Yunlan turned to look at him. Their gazes met, and then, in unison, they both said, "The earthquake just now." No sooner had they spoken when the vague shaking came once again. Just as during the aftershock of a normal earthquake, footsteps and people's voices could be heard in the hallway. Zhao Yunlan's apartment was a bit high up, so the shaking was probably more pronounced up there. When a second quake happened, people had started to run out in a panic. Laying a hand on the wall, Zhao Yunlan carefully assessed the tremors. Does this earthquake seem a little weird to you? Like it's not the Earth's crust vibrating, it feels more like trembling. Shen Wei said, "It seems to be coming from the netherworld." It's a scene break. Well, I'm sure it's fine. You get earthquakes in the netherworld, but sometimes they're so strong that they just go up to the material plane. Nothing to worry about. Zhao Yunlun loaded his gun with special bullets and sheathed his talisman-inscribed dagger under his pant leg. He pulled all the money out of his wallet, stuffing it randomly into his pockets, and filled the wallet with a thick stack of talismans. Finally, he pulled out a thin carved piece of wood from the drawer, the true soul-guarding order, made from the bark of the genuine great divine tree. The words soul-guarding order burst into eye-catching sparks the moment it touched Zhao Yunlan's skin. "Let's go," he said to Shen Wei, cramming the soul-guarding order into his pocket. 20 minutes later, they arrived at 4 Bright Avenue and collected a few co-workers. In 2 vehicles, they all raced to the spot where Lin Jing had run into trouble. Dragon City was less than 300 kilometers from the scene of the incident, 4 hours by highway. Between the mountains and the hot springs, it was the classic location for a wellness resort. The villages that had been nearby had all been relocated so as not to mar the glorious scenery. Day after day, the only people who came through here were service workers or employees who were making purchases for the business. The resort was too quiet, practically a ghost town. There was a large delivery truck parked randomly in the middle of the road at the entrance. It still had its full load of fresh fruits and vegetables, with no sign of anything missing, except the driver. The driver's door was open, but there was no one to be seen. "Lots of service workers must come here from the nearby villages every day," Zhao Yunlan said. "Xiaogou, take the second car to the town police station and ask our colleagues there if they've received any missing person reports in the last few days." Go Cheng-chung was already keenly aware of the resort's creepiness. Just standing there was making his legs shake uncontrollably. It does kind of feel like Silent Hill up in here. I'm not going to lie. Director Zhao was clearly protecting him by asking him to leave, which made him sigh in relief, but for some reason his heart seemed to jump even further up into his throat. "Zhu-hong will go with you," Zhao Yunlan added. Zhu-hong wasn't like Xiaogou, so easily ordered around. She objected immediately. "I'm not leaving. I'm sticking with you. I'm not going anywhere." Zhao Yunlan got out a cigarette and put it in his mouth. "What, disobeying orders before you even officially resign?" Leaving no room for argument, Zhao Yunlan got back into the car and closed the door. "Lao Chu, get in this one." Zhu-hong stood rooted in place, glaring furiously at Zhao Yunlan. Chu Shuzhou waved at her from inside the other car. "Get moving. Director Zhao's plan makes sense. You won't be much help here, and Xiaogou might not be able to communicate very well. Help him out." Before Zhu-hong could say anything else, that asshole Zhao Yunlan had already slammed his foot on the gas and was driving away. End of the chapter. That was a short one. We are on page 203 for chapter 16 of, were we stopping it? That's right, we're reading through 18, correct. Asshole! Zhu-hong bent down and picked up a rock, hurling it after the car. As a female snake Yao, she had impressive strength, and when it came to smashing things, she was particularly gifted, accurate, steady, and merciless. There was a clang as the rock struck the trunk of Zhao Yunlan's official SID car, chipping off some paint. But, maybe because it wasn't his own car, Zhao Yunlan didn't care at all. Zhu-hong's phone vibrated in her pocket. She checked it and found a text from Chu Shuzhou, which read, "Director Zhao told me to tell you that the fine for vandalism will come out of your monthly bonus. Keep throwing rocks if you want, but once you run through your bonus, your pay will get docked. Take it easy unless you want to leave without a penny." Her new phone's life was cut short. It died in her hand with a crunch as she roared, "Zhao Yunlan, you fucking asshole!" Panicked, Go Cheng-chung only stared at his treasonous, insubordinate co-worker. He was too afraid to breathe a word. Zhu-hong turned and glared at him with red-rimmed eyes. "What are you looking at? Let's go!" Go Cheng-chung obediently trotted after her, only to meet the full force of her rage again, as she took it out on him. "What kind of man are you? Get in the driver's seat! Have you ever seen a man make a woman drive?" Driving a car wasn't like entering a public restroom. He'd never heard of any gender-related rules about it. Since she was clearly being unreasonable, he responded with honesty. Juja, technically, you're not a woman. Juhong's expression was dark and threatening, like a king cobra darting its forked tongue out before landing a deadly strike. Go Cheng Chung instinctively sensed the danger he was in and crawled into the car, too scared to let out so much as a fart. But then Juhong hesitated. Instead of getting in, she slammed the passenger door shut. I'm having too much fun. Slammed the passenger door shut and dismissed him. Fuck off by yourself. I'm going to find Zhao Yunlan. It all happened without Go Cheng Chung ever having a chance to voice a single full-fledged opinion. Swift as the wind, Juhong was already gone. Da Qing and Chu Shujia, riding along in Zhao Yunlan's car, weren't having a good time either, due to the presence of the esteemed deity in the passenger seat. Now that they knew Shen Wei was the sole executing emissary, neither the Corpse King nor the old cat could take their usual innocent joy in teasing anyone they could get their hands on. Thanks to the bizarre atmosphere, they drove all the way to the main entrance of the resort in complete silence. Upon arriving, they saw the grandiose words, Spring Harbor Resort, carved in marble relief on a sign in the beautifully designed flower beds. Somehow those carved words seemed impossibly bleak because of either the material itself or the overcast skies. Literally, this is a setting in Silent Hill 2. There were 2 security booths and 2 entrances at the gate with the roads blocked on either side to keep cars from entering. Off to the side was a card reader that allowed residents to come and go on foot, but its light was off. Evidently, the power had been cut. Zhao Yunlan parked at the entrance and then glanced at his phone just in time to see the final flicker of signal disappear completely. The security booth's window was open for some reason. A small package sat on the window ledge next to a notebook and an uncapped pen. There was a peculiar layer of dust covering both the ledge and the things on it. Zhao Yunlan put on some gloves and picked the notebook up to take a careful look. It turned out to be a record of packages that the guards had accepted on behalf of the residents. Each one was recorded before they were passed on to their recipients, who had to sign for them. The most recent entry was dated just the day before. It read, Unit 10A, Mr. Lee, cutting off mid-word. The person writing had been interrupted too abruptly to even finish. Silent Hill. Hills that are silent. I can't, if you have no idea what game I'm talking about, literally just Google like Silent Hill 2 Resort and you'll have the vibe of what's happening here. Closing his eyes, Zhao Yunlan could practically see the scene playing out. The courier handed the package through the window and then accepted the notebook, meticulously recording the package's information. Halfway through the word package, something had happened. But what? If the stuff was still here, where had the people gone? Fucking Silent Hill ass motherfucker. Literally epic. We are just half a second away from some Pyramid Head bullshit. Where even? Walking over, Shen Wei swiped a finger through the dust on the ledge. He rubbed it between his fingers and then said, It hasn't been here long. The dust? Zhao Yunlan asked. You can tell from just that? How? Shen Wei dusted his hands off. With most types, I wouldn't be able to tell, but this is human ash that collected here within the last 2 or 3 days. It's still very fresh. Zhao Yunlan had no response. Shen Wei had delivered the information with the same offhand tone he might use to say, This milk is fresh from the cow. Looking a little shocked, Zhao Yunlan closed the notebook and packed it securely in an evidence bag. Thank goodness he'd already sent Go Cheng Chung away. If this sight had scared the poor boy half to death, they all would have suffered 10,000 volts. You're sure this is bone ash? It doesn't look like it to me. It's not the kind from a crematorium, Shen Wei explained. You know the saying, grind someone's bones to dust and scatter their ashes? You know, just that colloquial term. Although we do have a song that involves ashes, ashes, we all fall down. So, which was directly based on not great things. So, there's just creepy sayings all over the planet. This individual might have been standing right here when their body disintegrated instantaneously. Their bones were shattered into this fine powder and landed here. Someone cast Disintegrate at 6th level. That's the only thing I can think of. We're in some weird combined realm of Silent Hill and Dungeons and Dragons. Chushuja had also made his way over to them and asked incredulously, "Then where's the rest of them?" "Incinerated." Shenwei adjusted his glasses. "Flesh and blood can't withstand as much pressure as bones, so they rarely leave any traces." Chushuja chose his next words carefully. "It sounds as though my lord knows how these people died?" Shenwei gave a polite nod. Humbly, he said, "I'm not terribly knowledgeable, but I do happen to know a little in regard to this. In the ancient past, after Gong knocked down Buzhou Mountain, the sky burst and the earth split. The Gui surfaced in the mortal realm for the first time, dripping with the ruthlessness of their birthplace thousands of zhang below the Huangquan. When that happened, every human and beast within a 10 li radius turned to dust in a heartbeat, just like this, and within 100 li, not a single blade of grass grew." As he spoke, he pointed at the landscaped flower beds beneath the entrance sign, still lush even in the depths of winter. "Those ornamental flowers are unaffected. They're probably artificial." "But this place is less than 10 li across," Zhao Yunlan pointed out. "There are 2 large pine trees right here by the entrance, way closer than 100 li away." "Because of that, I think," said Shenwei, pointing. The other 2 looked in the direction he was indicating. At the resort's entrance was a little garden surrounded by reception areas. Rather than a single building, reception was divided between several small buildings of different heights. They were arranged in a purposeful circle around the garden, like an excellent privacy screen. "Look," Shenwei continued, "the central pond is shaped like petals, and the waterway extends outward and just so happens to connect all the small buildings around it." Chushuja usually liked to play the big shot, but at this moment his attitude was considerably grounded and humble. "If I may say so, my lord, that's the 5x5 plum blossom array, isn't it?" "It is indeed. Chushang is well versed in these matters." Shenwei nodded. "The plum blossom array is commonly used to protect the home and ward off evil. Thanks to its presence, the yin energy was trapped inside by the array. As it was unable to get out, it would have only affected this little path by the entrance at most. If a crudely constructed plum blossom array was enough to hold it off, that suggests to me that the Great Hotu seal remains intact for the time being. This is most likely just a small leak here. Once it's fixed, it'll be fine." Chushuja and Da Qing didn't know what the Great Hotu seal was, and Shenwei spoke so calmly that he might have been talking about a button having fallen off a shirt. A few easy stitches and it would be back in place. They started to relax. Zhao Yunlan, on the other hand, gave him a thoughtful glance. To anyone who didn't know better, Shenwei generally came across as someone who was always composed, who knew his limits and never crossed the line, but in reality not a single thing about him was inside the line. Zhao Yunlan was fairly confident about what was actually going on here. Shenwei had already gotten what he wanted, and as a result, he was probably completely at ease now. He might not care at all about the Great Hotu seal at this point. Zhao Yunlan suspected he might not even care about his own life or death. "I suppose the netherworld must be in complete chaos right about now." Shenwei smiled as he spoke, then realized he was perhaps letting his schadenfreude show a little too blatantly. As that was a bit ill-mannered, he wiped the smile off his face and quietly cleared his throat. "No matter. Everyone, follow closely behind me." Chushuja and Da Qing deserted their boss at once, opting instead to stick close to the boss's mighty wife. Meanwhile, Zhao Yunlan had a vague sense of foreboding. "Really? At this creepy, abandoned, dust-covered resort? Are you sure?" At first, when he'd casually handed this life-lending case off to Lin Jing, he hadn't given it too much thought, but thinking back on it, wasn't life-lending what had set off the reincarnation dial case? And the reincarnation dial was in Ghostface's hands. The Great Seal was weakening. It could still hold back most of the Gui, but it could no longer contain the Chaos King of the Gui. 3 of the 4 hallowed artifacts had already appeared, and while their side didn't have the possession of the reincarnation dial, they had both the Mountain River Awl and the Merit Brush. Trouble was, the 4 pillars were like 4 legs. Not all 4 needed to be destroyed to bring down the entire seal. If the Gwei could knock out 2 of the 4 legs, that would be enough. The critical question, then, was the location of the soul-guarding lamp. But who had the first clue as to where the mysterious lamp of legend might be? As they headed in through the pedestrian walkway by the main gate, the thick stench of death hit them in the face. Da Qing's fur stood on end. The soul-guarding whip surreptitiously twined down Zhao Yunlan's arm, its tip peeking out near the wrist. With his other hand, Zhao Yunlan felt for the little dagger hidden in his sleeve. From Zhao Yunlan's perspective, the Spring Harbor Resort was essentially a dangerous trap. Lin Jing's video hadn't shown him going inside. Lin Jing's level of caution and care meant there was no way he'd go into such an ominous, menacing environment alone without contacting the team first. Something must have misled or even coerced him, stripping him of his senses before he even set foot inside. Even as a direct descendant of Bodhidharma himself, Lin Jing still wouldn't be able to withstand the force of the brutality erupting from thousands of chi below the Huangquan River when the Great Seal cracked open. Wouldn't it be easier to just kill him directly, though? Who were they trying to lure here by keeping him? The soul-guarding order? Shen Wei? The charming little path was completely empty. Every building was eerie and vacant, inhabited by not even the shadow of a ghost. Somewhere along the line, Shen Wei's black robes had manifested, and in response to something, the soul-executing blade was already in his hand. The footfalls of 3 people and a cat seemed unusually loud on the empty path. The carrying sound only contributed to the indescribably creepy atmosphere. No kidding, we are about to find a 2x4 with some nails in it and like a red radio at this point. This is so unbelievably Silent Hills. And that's not an insult. That is a great compliment. Give me the Silent Hills vibe. I was not expecting it, but it is appreciated. You cannot go wrong with Silent Hill creepiness. It's a winner every time, in my book. The setting sun hung on the horizon, but its light was no longer a warm reddish orange. A dull, bloody red reminiscent of the color on the cheeks of paper dolls at funeral stores, it gave off a chilly glow. The light dragged their shadows on the ground, turning their silhouettes disturbingly long and dark. We're gonna hear a siren at any fucking point! And then then the paint's gonna rust off the walls. Damn. Zhao Yunlan gave the black cat a sudden nudge away with his foot and took a huge stride forward. Before he even turned, he was already holding his dagger up to the middle of his back. There was a tooth-grinding clang as Yochu fangs met the steel blade. The Yochu lost a few teeth, and a crack appeared in the steel. With all his weight on one foot, Zhao Yunlan was about to pivot and strike the beast again when sheer horror suddenly spread across the Yochu's face. Its hideous form was sucked into Shen Wei's palm like a deflating balloon. Countless bells rang out at once in the distance as a black mist rose 1/2 meter high on the little resort's clean roads. There was a sharp yell as the black cat shot up to Zhao Yunlan's shoulder. Pustule-ridden hands were reaching up from below the ground. Yochu had climbed onto the roof at some point, materializing the way zombies would suddenly appear behind people in the movies. There was a whoosh as one jumped down and clamped huge claws down on Chushuja's head. The Yochu opened its mouth to bite down. In an instant, Chushuja's stick-thin hand turned as hard as stone, and, as if competing with the Gwei to see who was crueler, he punched directly through the Yochu's throat. It staggered back a few steps, then toppled to the ground. Before it even breathed its last, countless other Gwei of even more bizarre shapes threw themselves at it, devouring it down to the last scrap in the blink of an eye. Still more Gwei climbed out of the ground, each uglier than the last. The corner of Shen Wei's eye twitched. He had been born a Gwei, and his deep-rooted loathing for his own kind only deepened as they dared to appear in front of Zhao Yunlan. He drew his blade. Zhao Yunlan hurriedly said, "Shen Wei, hold on, this doesn't seem like..." But it was too late. The soul-executing blade grew several meters, effortlessly cutting down countless Gwei. Shenwei's expression was glacial. With a flip of his wrist, the blade pressed down with thousands of tons of pressure, far too sharp for anything to block. He split the thick black mist beneath the resort with one swing, and it dispersed before disappearing entirely. Then the blade struck the ground, opening a long, narrow crack dozens of meters deep. A blood-curdling scream rang out. Shenwei glared viciously down into the fissure. "Get the hell out of here!" With the astounding force and lightning speed of his attacks, it wasn't until then that Zhao Yunlan, who was not even 5 steps away, finally managed to grab his arm and hold him back. "This doesn't look like the Great Seal breaking. I think it's some distorted kind of ghost army summons. Don't do anything rash." Laughter echoed from all around them before he was even done speaking. "Yes," a voice said. "Too bad the Guardian's brain and mouth aren't as fast as the Lord Emissary's blade." The crack Shenwei had opened started to break further apart. Shenwei caught hold of Zhao Yunlan and held him close. Chu Shuja and the black cat landed on the other side of the rapidly widening gap. In no time at all, it was too wide to even see the people on the other side. There was a muffled grunt from Shenwei as his hand, which had a firm hold on Zhao Yunlan, seemed to be dragged away. A ball of black mist wrapped around his arm with the stickiness of cobwebs. That's the end of the chapter. And even though it might be a few minutes early, we're compensating for, I think, coming in a few minutes late on the first break. This is the second one. I now just fully need a new cup of tea. So going to take a break real quick, get some more tea, walk around, that kind of thing. This is your cue. Go grab a snack or what have you. I will do my absolute best to keep this break short. And we are on page 213 for chapter 17. So I will be back in just a few minutes for the last 2 chapters of this stream. I'll be right back. And welcome back. Alrighty. Once again, we are on page 213 for chapter 17. Chu Shuja's last text message sat on Go Cheng Chung's screen, urging him to stay away from the resort no matter what happened, and more importantly, to prevent anyone else from going there. Go Cheng Chung tried to call him and tell him that Ju Hong had run off, only to find that the call wouldn't go through. He tried sending messages and leaving voicemails, but they too got no response, as if they were rocks sinking to the bottom of the ocean. It was as though everyone else in the world had disappeared, leaving his poor little self behind, helpless and alone and at a complete loss about what to do. Go Cheng Chung pulled the car over on the roadside, where he hemmed and hawed for a good long while, before finally gathering enough courage to follow the GPS into the nearest town. Once there, he made a beeline for the local police station, but well before he reached it, he could see a huge crowd clustering around the building's entrance. They were completely blocking the road. Go Cheng Chung honked once, but no one paid any attention. An old lady was leaving the station, leaning on someone who was helping her. Her hair was pure white, and she seemed unsteady on her feet. Even with someone holding on to her, she managed to trip and stumble, falling against the hood of Go Cheng Chung's car. Alarmed, Go Cheng Chung got out of the car at once. The old woman's friends and family scrambled to help her back up, as did the police officer who had followed her out. Their voices rose in a great clamor, and the old lady started crying loudly as if none of them were there. Her sobs only got the crowd more worked up. Go Cheng Chung heard one angry voice declare, "I have no clue what cops these days even do. According to them, they're not responsible for this, they're not responsible for that, and they can't solve anything. Why does the country even bother keeping them around in that case?" This one angry voice is like, defund the fucking police. Amazing. Exactly, exclaimed someone else. Just look at this poor lady. It's been just her and that one son for so long. They depend on each other. If anything happened to him, would she even be able to go on? This tactless question hit the old woman right where it hurt most. Her weeping became even more hysterical. The officer who had followed her out was a young woman around the same age as Go Cheng Chung. Like him, she looked like a recent graduate. But at the moment, she was also representing the government, which meant all of the questions and pointed fingers were aimed at her. Face red and at a complete loss, she said haltingly, "We have to follow procedure. An adult must be missing for over 48 hours before..." Angry cursing drowned her out at once. "Rules and procedures are set in stone, but people aren't," someone cried. We've really come out the woodwork like fucking ACAB. Damn! Holy shit! The missing might still be alive now, but you guys want to wait 48 hours? Anything could happen to them in 48 hours. It would be too late. Their corpses would be long cold by then. But you're still not going to do anything? Young lady, ask yourself, what's the difference between your inaction and murder? Oh, shit. And when was this written? This was like in the 2010s? Somewhere around there? Because the show happened in 2018. Fucking respect. The young officer thought that was all perfectly reasonable and made sense, but the fact remained that this was a small local police station with limited manpower. What was more, rules were rules. No matter how reasonable she thought the crowd's requests were, she couldn't just go against regulations. She was overcome with frustration. Tears began to swim in her reddened eyes. "Quit!" I'm all right. The whole thing was quickly giving Go Cheng Chung a headache. The crowd was saying all sorts of things and all talking at once, as worked up as a pitchfork-wielding mob. Then the old woman, who was still crying on the hood of his car, suddenly passed out, eyes rolling back in her head. Go Cheng Chung hurriedly pushed his way through. "Excuse me, sorry, please make way." He pulled his work ID and keys from his pocket. Flustered, he tossed his ID to the woman's friends and family. "Take my car and drive her to the hospital." The relative who'd caught his badge stared at it. "Huh?" Go Cheng Chung looked at what they were holding. "Oh, sorry, wrong thing. Take these." He quickly traded the car keys for his ID, which he then handed to the female officer beside him. "Comrade, can you take me to your supervisor? It's urgent." She looked at his ID in confusion, then suddenly straightened up. Are you the higher up from Dragon City?" No, I'm not a higher up. My office sent someone here 2 days ago to investigate a death. Your station should already have all the paperwork, but our colleague went missing yesterday. Our boss is already at the crime scene. He told me to come here and check in with you guys." Go Cheng Chung finished speaking and wiped his brow, which had gotten sweaty despite it being the dead of winter. Then, with rare competence, he asked the crowd, "Are you all here to file reports? All for missing people?" Many people nodded. "Oh," he said. "Oh, so how did they go missing?" It was like he'd poked a hornet's nest. The whole crowd exploded into speech at once. The wall of noise was like 5,000 ducks simultaneously yelling at the top of their lungs. The overwhelming noise almost made Go Cheng Chung pass out. He pressed a hand firmly against his pants pocket, afraid that his fear of people would activate the little stun baton in his pocket and accidentally hurt the innocent crowd. But to his own surprise, he didn't feel as afraid as he'd expected. That was just how Go Cheng Chung was. Whenever he wanted to ask others for help, he felt like a tremendously ignorant nuisance. Naturally, that made him afraid of whomever it was, and that grew into a fear of all communication, whether speaking aloud or even just making eye contact. But at a time like this, when he realized that the people in front of him required his help, his words always flowed far more smoothly. It was as if he'd been born to do this. Paraphrasing a quote from one of my favorite musicians. She said something, Emily Autumn said something to the effect of, "I can't fight for myself, but for others I can kill." And I've always really identified with that. And Go Cheng Chung, as relatable as he is for me, just got that much more relatable. Stick up for myself? No. Somebody else, I'll fucking kill you. I will murder you. How dare you? Yup. A light bulb went off in Go Cheng Chung's head. He waved his hands abruptly and spoke over the noisy crowd. I can't hear what you're all saying. Let's take it slow, okay? When I ask a question, can you please answer by raising your hand? First question, does your missing friend or relative work at Spring Harbor Resort? If yes, please raise your hand. Everyone's hand shot up at once. Beside him, the officer's eyes widened. All the racket earlier must have left her ears ringing, making her unable to focus on anything beyond the fact that adults couldn't be reported missing until they'd been gone for 48 hours. She hadn't made the connection that this could be a single, very serious case. Go Cheng Chung composed himself. He was getting a clearer idea of how to proceed. Next, he asked, anyone who's certain that their friend or relative went missing at the resort, please keep your hand up. If you're not sure, please put your hand down, okay? A few hands wavered and were lowered, only to be hesitantly raised again. A middle-aged man spoke up. Boss, can I say something? I'm not the boss, Go Cheng Chung sighed. Never mind that. Please go ahead, sir. My little sister waitresses at a restaurant at the resort's reception halls. She's only 19. She never came home after work last night and we couldn't reach her. She's very responsible. She's never stayed out all night without a reason before. The entire family is worried sick. We all went out and searched for her in the middle of the night, and we went back and forth along her route to work a bunch of times. And then my dad and cousin disappeared too. When we couldn't reach them by phone either, I came to make a report. The man's eyes were bloodshot, but he tried his best to keep his voice steady, wanting to remain as calm as possible. Boss, a young girl is one thing, but two grown men? What could possibly happen to them? My dad's 70 years old. Even if this were a human trafficking case, who'd traffic someone's old man? The entire crowd agreed that it was the same story for them. Everybody who had a missing loved one was as anxious as a cat on a hot tin roof. Okay. Obviously, that's just a saying. And this work originates from China, so the odds that it's a reference to like a classic play from America is 0. However, funny that Cat on a Hot Tin Roof is a play that features that one of the main characters is a repressed gay man. Just thought I'd share. I don't know. That might be the fact that, you know, it's a gay play. It's a play with a gay man. I just thought it was a little factoid there. Where the heck did I get off course? I'm down here. There we are. Everybody who had a missing loved one was as anxious as a cat on a hot tin roof, and they all tried to push closer to Go Cheng Chung to say a bit more about their own situation. They were all desperate for an explanation from him. He looked far too young to be entrusted with this situation, but in their eyes, Go Cheng Chung had essentially become their savior, and they all wanted a piece of this savior to dispel their worries. What with all the jostling and shoving, a woman holding a child was pushed to the ground. The 3-year-old in her arms started wailing loudly. Someone nearby yelled, "Don't push, we're all worried here," while someone else screamed, "Watch out for the child, don't step on the child." Go Cheng Chung felt dizzy. If only Ju Hongzhou were here, he thought. If only Director Zhao were here. What should he do? They had so much faith in him. They were counting on him to take care of things here. He'd had this job for 6 months, and this was the first time in charge of a situation all by himself. How could he fail to live up to their expectations and screw this up? If it were Director Zhao, what would he do? If it were Chuga, what would he do? He couldn't let these people go to the resort. It was too dangerous. Go Cheng Chung suddenly took 2 steps forward and stood on the curb. Everyone! Everyone! The crowd quieted. He held his work ID up high. I'm here from the Special Investigations Department in Dragon City. We specialize in very important, serious cases. Our boss has already rushed to the scene with our very best elite personnel, and he sent me here to explain the situation to you all. We haven't found any signs of your loved ones yet, but we also haven't had terrible news. We are already doing absolutely everything we can to search for them. Right now, the best thing you can all do to help is to cooperate with the comrades here at the police station while they record all the details. Just absolutely do not go anywhere near the resort. If you do, you'll make things harder for the rescuers, who'll have more trouble finding the victims. He had never spoken so much in a single breath before. In that instant, Go Cheng Chung felt like he wasn't fighting alone. His heart felt warm and toasty, as if a flame were burning within him. Flame, fire, orange. Cupping his hands together, he bowed to everybody around him. Thank you, everyone. You have my word that we will do our very best. Now can I ask you all to line up and head inside to make your reports? At first, the crowd just stood there and stared at each other. But then, incredibly, they started lining up noisily. Slowly, order prevailed. Following directions from the young female officer, they successfully formed a line and filed inside. Go Cheng Chung, however, stood frozen in place for a long while, unable to believe that he had actually done it. My son! He did the thing! I'm so proud. The other members of the SID weren't having it so easy. Shen Wei, entangled in the black mist, was suffering from a renewed case of bullheadedness and flatly refusing to let go of Zhao Yunlan no matter what. He had the soul-executing blade between his teeth, and the blade's icy glint made his lips look scarily pale. He angled his head around to turn the blade on the mist. Zhao Yunlan grabbed the blade from Shen Wei's mouth. Give me that. He took the blade, completely unique in all the world, and slashed at the black mist wrapped around Shen Wei's arm. But beneath the blade, the substance felt like quicksand and was barely dented by the fierce weapon. Never mind, cut. Shen Wei held Zhao Yunlan even tighter. That's the power of chaos. It's the only thing the soul-executing blade can't cut through. Nothing will work but to cut my arm off. Do it quickly. Zhao Yunlan ignored him and carefully sheathed the blade. Then he got out a paper talisman of the soul-guarding order. With a snap of his fingers, a small spark burst forth, and he sent the blazing talisman shooting straight into the mist. And the talisman disappeared. Not a speck remained. Cut off my arm, Shen Wei yelled. Zhao Yunlan acted like he didn't hear him. Next, he took out the true soul-guarding order, carved from the great divine tree itself, which he had brought along specially. Alarmed, Shen Wei said, You can't. But before Shen Wei could finish speaking, Zhao Yunlan proved that actions were faster than words. The soul-guarding order, made from the wood of the great divine tree, began to burn. The flame rose 1/3 of a meter into the air, burning an unnatural red. The black mist ensnaring Shen Wei's arm finally shrank back in fear. Regaining the use of his arm, the first thing Shen Wei did was grab the burning soul-guarding order. Still holding Zhao Yunlan close, he dodged around the swamp-like mist. A pool of clear spring water welled up in his palm, extinguishing the fire on the soul-guarding order, but half of the words were already burned off. Only the right half of the characters were still legible. The words on the back, "Guard the souls of the living, bring peace to the hearts of the dead," were entirely gone. The pair beat a hasty retreat from the area. Expression dark, Shen Wei said, Don't you realize that you don't actually belong in the reincarnation cycle? That your status as guardian essentially grants you protection? This was carved from the great divine tree's bark, and you... Anytime Shen Wei wanted to curse, his mind tended to go blank. He repeated the word you a few times, but was unable to come up with anything better than a refined, You squandering fool. Behind him, the black shadow kept giving chase. It was as thick as ink that was impossible to dilute, and wherever it passed, nothing remained. The shadow swallowed everything, almost as though it could swallow even emptiness itself. It was true chaos. Neither man had ever imagined a day when they'd cut such a sorry figure, fleeing fast enough that they must have surely exceeded the speed limit of life and death. Even running for his life, Zhao Yunlan found the time to roll his eyes at Shen Wei. You're the squandering fool here, ready to cut off your arm or dig out your heart at the least provocation. Do you think you're a gecko? I'm not arguing with you. Shen Wei wrapped Zhao Yunlan in his arms, and the huge black cloak of the emissary billowed around them like a dark cloud soaring into the sky. We're in a gothic romance all of a sudden. His feet left the ground, but he stayed low, still holding Zhao Yunlan, and traversed dozens of meters in a heartbeat. Then he gently touched down and dove straight into the crack in the ground, swift as a black swallow. Faint tremors shook the ground once again. From even deeper down, a huge group of reapers, with their penchant for terrible timing, burst forth. Reapers were always either late when they shouldn't be, or rushing forward when they were supposed to be delaying. But the moment this bunch appeared, over half of them were swallowed up by the all-consuming black shadow. The magistrate yelped. However, as he was about to dive back into the ground without a word, Oxhead and Horseface, standing on either side, pulled him back out like a radish. My lord, you can't. The underground is not a hiding place. Just like that, a mismatched assortment of Reapers also joined Team Run for Your Life, contributing absolutely nothing useful in the process. Shenwei suddenly leaped back out of the crack in the ground, shoving Zhao Yunlan forward. Zhao Yunlan followed his cue and let the momentum carry him forward a dozen or so meters. He steadied himself with his hands on the ground, then stood. Shenwei, meanwhile, had levitated into the air. He formed a seal with both hands and silently recited an incantation from some distant time as the black shadow closed in, bit by bit. Just as the shadow was about to touch the hem of his robes, a piercing white light erupted from the seal in Shenwei's hands. His timing was impeccable. The shadow lurched to a stop right in front of him, and then, shuddering violently, it was slowly sucked into the white light. Everyone held their breaths. It wasn't long before the all-encompassing shadow was fully drawn into the increasingly blinding white light. The cold sweat gathering on Shenwei's face finally dripped down his cheek. The magistrate fell back onto the ground, and Zhao Yunlan let out a breath, slowly relaxing his fist, which had been clenched tightly enough to leave crescent marks from his nails in his palm. The white blaze started to shrink in Shenwei's hand. The situation seemed to be coming under control. And then, all at once, everything changed. With no warning, a figure appeared behind Shenwei as though he had ripped the air open. Ghostface, who had been lying in wait for some unknown amount of time, thrust an icicle over a meter long through Shenwei's back, right into his heart. Before the magistrate and the others realized what was happening, a long whip snapped out, curling toward Ghostface like a venomous snake. There was a whoosh as it kicked up a fierce gust of wind, vicious enough to hurt where it touched bare skin. The nearby Reapers felt like they'd been collectively slapped in the face, cheeks burning with pain where they were exposed to the air. As one, they turned their faces away and backed up as the whip wrapped precisely around Ghostface's neck. The magistrate was so filled with woe he was on the verge of vomiting. 500 years earlier, when the Great Seal had first shown signs of weakening, the Netherworld had taken charge and gathered forces from all over to discuss the matter. Back then, a single call from the Netherworld had been enough to gather hundreds of immortals from all over, each one of them staunchly righteous. Every sentence they uttered was about the people and the world, so passionate were they about sacrificing everything for the Great Seal. But in the wake of the battle atop the peak of Kunlun Mountain, those people had disappeared en masse, as if by mutual agreement. It was understandable. The road of cultivation was endlessly long. One had to face difficulties and dangers others could not fathom, and endure loneliness beyond that of ordinary individuals. Perhaps 1 in a million had the natural talent, and those who were determined and willing to walk the lonely path, who didn't look for instant success or give up halfway, were rarer still. But beyond all that, no matter how great one's innate gift or how hard they worked, they still needed luck. Without it, success could slip right through one's fingers at the last moment. Who wouldn't prioritize self-preservation, having gone through such hardship just to get where they were? Who would rush to the front just to be cannon fodder? If the Great Seal hadn't been damaged, and thus pushed the Netherworld to the front lines to bear the brunt of the impact, the magistrate would have also preferred to stay far, far away. He was just a puny little magistrate. Even the 10 kings of the Yenlo courts were betting that the soul-executing emissary's pride would keep him from stooping to settle scores with them, thereby allowing the Netherworld to get away with all their petty machinations. But who among them would dare to truly go head-to-head with the king of the Gwei from primordial times? The emissary alone was enough to scare them out of their wits, never mind the emotionally unstable Ghostface. The magistrate's expression was complicated as his gaze landed on Zhao Yunlan. Cowards filled their ranks. Perhaps only those true primordial gods and demons from before chaos had shattered could have hearts large enough to set aside their own lives for the greater good. Zhao Yunlan might be a mere mortal now, but he still dared to wrap his whip around the king of the Gwei's neck without a moment's hesitation. As beings without honor, flitting about like flies as they fought for survival, it was impossible for them to understand the kind of incisive passion that gambled life and death in a single instant. It was hard for them to imagine the moment of trudging forward, like a moth to a flame, in the face of tens of thousands of enemies. Above all, it was hard for them to measure up to the great wild of the distant past, when the sky and earth first parted, and there was nothing to fear. And yet, Kunlun Jun had disappeared into the reincarnation cycle. How dare this man, Zhao Yunlan, who was clearly no more than a silver-tongued mortal, not be terror-stricken or panicked? Was the soul alone enough, even washed clean again and again by countless journeys through the reincarnation cycle, even after losing the authority and power of the mountain god? The three of them were in a stalemate. The veins of Shenwei's forehead pulsed as he forced his fingers closed. The white light vanished within his fist, taking all the chaos around them with it. Black smoke like spider silk suddenly flowed from the icicle buried in his chest, wrapping him within an enormous cocoon. Ghostface still held the other end of the icicle in one hand, and he had managed to slip his other hand between the whip and his throat before the whip had wrapped around his neck entirely. Hovering in midair, the king of the Gui met the eyes of the fearless mortals in the distance. He saw a hard light in Zhao Yunlan's eyes, burning even brighter than the soul fire that had once brought light to the entire place of great disrespect. If the soul guarding order hadn't been damaged, Ghostface rasped, voice hoarse and broken, my neck might be missing a layer of skin right about now. How unfortunate. Squeezing the words out from between his teeth, Zhao Yunlan said, let go of him. Him? He and I were born as twin kings of the Gui. You know, even though circumstances left us so incompatible, I still had no desire to hurt him. He was the one who drove me to it every step of the way. Pausing between each word, Ghostface continued, if you want him, fine. Bring me the soul-guarding lamp in exchange. Who the fuck even knew what a soul-guarding lamp was? Zhao Yunlan's handsome face clouded over. If you were smart, you'd jam an icicle in my chest, too. Otherwise, I'll make sure you never have a moment's peace for all eternity. Through broken peals of laughter, Ghostface replied, if you were Kunlun Jun, I'd gladly die here today if it meant ending your existence. But he quivered once, violently, and the soul-guarding whip, which no longer had the great divine tree's protection, shattered into innumerable fragments. The force of it cut Zhao Yunlan's palm open to the bone. My dear guardian, you truly have nothing to fear from me, Ghostface sighed. I'm grateful for your soul fire, and thanks to his influence, I can't help but like you a little. There's no harm in letting you live. There came another sharp laugh. Black mist filled the air, and just like that, both Ghostface and the cocooned Shenwei were gone. That's the end of the chapter. We now, we're on page 227 for chapter 18, also known as the last chapter of today's stream. The palm of Zhao Yunlan's hand was a bloody mess. Eventually, unable to stay silent any longer, the magistrate cleared his throat. Guardian, you... Zhao Yunlan twitched as though the magistrate's voice had startled him awake. When he glanced over, the corners of his eyes angled upward. There was an unutterable, inauspicious redness there. His pupils held the terrifying darkness of the abyss, and his thick lashes cast a bottomless shadow over his eyes. For a moment, the guardian seemed like a complete stranger to the magistrate, whose skin broke out in goosebumps under his gaze. I need to ask a favor, Lord Magistrate, Zhao Yunlan said quietly. Would you please take me to see the real reincarnation cycle in the netherworld? A favor, he says. Just a favor. Quick favor, Magistrate. Just one thing. If you could just help me out real quick. It was best for the doer to undo his own handiwork. It was Shenong who had sealed Kunlun Jun's primordial spirit before becoming the reincarnation cycle. If Zhao Yunlan wanted to awaken Kunlun's spirit, going there was probably his best bet. When the magistrate didn't reply, Zhao Yunlan asked, "What, I can't go?" Quickly, the magistrate stammered, This humble one, it expected the guardian to inquire about the soul-guarding lamp." The soul-guarding lamp. Zhao Yunlan raised his left eyebrow so minutely that it might have been only a slight twitch. The fingers of his left hand were pressed unconsciously against his wounded right palm. Blood stained his fingertips crimson. Alarmed and frightened, the magistrate watched him, but Zhao Yunlan simply lowered his gaze and said, "Please lead the way." "Director Zhao," a woman's voice rang out behind him. Without turning, Zhao Yunlan recognized that it was Zhu Hong speaking. Zhao Yunlan showed no sign of anger or other emotion. He might have even completely forgotten that her presence meant she was disobeying a direct order. "If you see Chu Shujia and Da Qing, tell them to keep looking for Lin Jing," he told her. "There's something I need to do. I'll be back." "Where are you going? I'll go with you." Zhao Yunlan leveled an expressionless look at her. "No need. Having you along would just hold me back. You should train for a few more years first, little snake." Steam was practically coming out of Zhu Hong's ears. "Little snake? I'm a little snake? What are you then? In my tribe, someone your age would still be nibbling their eggshells, you mortal brat." That was one of the best snake-related insults I've ever freaking heard, and it's quite hilarious that I've heard more than this one. The corners of Zhao Yunlan's lips quirked into a cold smile as he left. He didn't look back. Lin Jing, meanwhile, was meditating, or at least he was doing his best to. After his senses had begun working properly, he'd realized someone had kidnapped him. He had no idea where he was, but he could tell he was leaning against a huge rock. Beside the rock was a giant towering tree, so tall that its crown couldn't be seen from the ground. Torrents of water seemed to be cascading all around him, but some sort of invisible dome surrounded him and protected him from drowning, at least for now. He was also surrounded by Yochu. The creatures pressed around him on every side, salivating. Just looking at them made Lin Jing quiver. All he could think to do was close his eyes and chant scriptures, but he'd barely uttered 2 lines when he realized that Buddhist scriptures only seemed to aggravate his neighbors. A ruckus broke out among the Yochu, who began to roar and showed no sign of stopping. With a gulp, Lin Jing forced a sad attempt at a smile. I only just got here. I didn't know we had a rule against reciting scriptures. Kindly forgive me? I'll correct my ways at once." The Yochu nearest to Lin Jing greedily came even closer. It raised its nose and sniffed hungrily at his scent of fresh flesh and blood. Lin Jing was about to cry. "I haven't bathed in 3 days. Comrade, be mindful of your manners." The Yochu's mouth gaped open, preparing to bite, only for a more human-like Yochu to suddenly grab the back of that one's neck, reacting to the gall of it daring to claim food for itself. This higher-ranked Yochu twisted its fingers, separating the inferior Yochu's head from its body. The head hung there, dangling like a grotesquely shaped wind chime. What is it with both Priest and MXTX having particular, different and differently flavored mind, but just particular gifts for really just awful imagery, horrifying imagery, visceral imagery? Do all danmei authors just do that? The one grotesquely shaped like a wind chime is some Hannibal bullshit. The one that had casually killed its own kin tore an ear from the corpse and gobbled it up without even a splash of soy sauce or vinegar. What did I just say? Hannibal. Then it generously threw the corpse a short distance away. The corpse was immediately swarmed by Yochu, which descended on it as if it were a holiday feast. Less than half a minute later, barely even a scrap remained of the dead Yochu's skin or bones. Gawking, Lin Jing murmured, "My Buddha is merciful. Please reflect on your table manners, benefactors." Having that summed up as table manners. Oh, she's funny. Yeah. We have art. And not that it's not narratively valid to have illustrated this, but this is the first time that they've decided to, like, really hurt me by giving me a visual representation of this. His benefactors howled at him in unison, undoubtedly interested in practicing their table manners on him. Lin Jing wiped cold sweat from his forehead. "Please, by all means, do as you wish." Just then, a sharp whistling sounded in the distance. All the Yochu, the Gui, instantly fell silent. Fear twisted their expressions. They fled like fog blown away by the wind, and indeed, Lin Jing felt a strong wind blow past him. In the next moment, someone was hurled down from above and pinned in place on the trunk of the strange adjacent tree. 4 pitch-black manacles immediately sprouted from the tree and locked themselves around the person's limbs. A second look showed Lin Jing that the person had a meter-long icicle buried in his heart, which meant he was as good as dead. Lin Jing was about to look away, unable to bear the sight, when the person's eyes opened, and suddenly Lin Jing recognized him. Shocked, Lin Jing cried out in a ragged voice, "Shen La She!" We had to have art of this. And I can't even be mad at it because it's narratively called for. Like, you should. I should really be more angry at Priest for doing this to me, to be honest. It's not necessarily the narrator's fault, you know what I mean? Narrator. The artists, you know? Not their fault. This is not Seven Seas doing. They're just doing their job. This is Priest's fault. This is all her fault. Good Lord. Even with his forehead dripping with cold sweat and constant tremors running through his body, Shen Wei was courteous. He gave Lin Jing a slight nod. Lin Jing rushed to the edge of the invisible dome. "What's happening? Shen She, why are you here? Who hurt you?" Shen Wei's lips trembled, but he was unable to speak. Far off, someone humphed. A black shadow flashed in front of Lin Jing's eyes, and Ghostface landed like a giant bat. Ghostface stood before... Hang on. Did you guys get a break in? Did you guys see any lag or anything like that? Did that hiccup for you? Because my OBS just had to disconnect and reconnect. So it should be fine now, but I just wanted to check in. Just a little jump? Okay. Because sometimes you guys come to a crashing halt and everything looks fine on my end, and sometimes vice versa. So good to know that this was one of those cases where you guys are fine. Ghostface stood before Shen Wei, gleefully drinking in the sight of him. And then, slowly, he took off his mask. Lin Jing gasped. "Why are there 2 Shen La She?" But upon closer inspection, the now unmasked Shen La She's skin was slightly paler. Abnormally pale, in fact. It was a white that bordered on blue, as though he had been soaked in formaldehyde. The skin tone was cold, somehow carrying resentment and yin energy. It made his face, which should have been so handsome, seem like a piece of skin draped over a skull. She really She really chooses some choice moments for deeply effective imagery and description, doesn't she? To Lin Jing, it was as though this other person was some sort of unfortunate imitation. Perhaps this was someone who'd gotten plastic surgery to look like his boss's so-called wife. Surgery by someone rather unskilled, that was. There was no question that this person was the ugly bootleg version. The bootleg slowly opened his mouth, not calling him a bootleg. Ah! I'm a sentimental person, but you forced my hand. I have no choice but to kill you, my brother. As he spoke, his eyes sparkled with a strange light, as though he was both reluctant and yearning at once. The Chaos Kings of the Gui had entered the world as twins, neither superior to the other. But only Shen Wei had received Kunlun Jun's protection. He alone had attained divinity and now stood unaffected by the Great Seal. If I consume you, do you think I could break through the whole seal? Even nailed to the ancient merit tree, Shen Wei still laughed at him. The laugh was weak, but mocking. What, has your scheme with the 4 hollowed artifacts failed already? What happened to the reincarnation dial? Did it turn into an ordinary rock in your hands? Ghostface's eyelid. He has been spending too much time with Zhao Yulan. That's what that was. Ghostface's eyelid twitched violently. He slapped Shen Wei across the face, and his brother's head snapped to the side with the force of it. The blow broke the skin inside his mouth on his gritted teeth. Shen Wei spat the blood out, then said, "The reincarnation dial was made from the 3 life rock, and the 3 life rock and the ancient merit tree are each connected to one of every person's 7 corporeal souls. They are connected through the souls of the living. Only the mountain river all contains both yin and yang within itself as one. The all can trap anything in the world. I lured you out with it and put a tracking spell on you. Then, exactly as I expected, you brought out the soul tempering cauldron, and then the merit brush, where everyone could see. The most important hearthstone under the soul tempering cauldron is from the 3 life rock. As for where you found such a fragment, I don't even need to guess. The moment the merit brush appeared in the world, I found the reincarnation dial and put it in the mountain river all. How do you suppose that cauldron ended up in your hands so easily? Did you really think yourself so lucky that someone would just give you a pillow the moment you felt sleepy? Mountain River All. The Mountain River All was in your hands all along. You were the one who planned for it to appear in Qingxi village. Can't you read? Mountain River. Mountain River. The 36 mountain beings with Kunlun Mountain. Begin with Kunlun Mountain. I inherited the mountain god's power and an inherent connection to the 10,000 great mountains. Why would I fight you for something that has always been in my hands? Ghostface found dead in Miami. Jesus. Cold sweat dripped into Shen Wei's mouth. Unbothered, he licked his lips. One more thing you might want to know. Remember the bait you used to lure me here? That wisp of chaos you took from your own body. Where do you suppose it is now, after I sucked it away? His expression twisting into something nearly savage, Ghostface's countenance went blue and then red. His hand lashed out and grasped the icicle in Shen Wei's chest. The blood drenching Shen Wei's robes stuck flesh and fabric together tightly. He was a tragic sight. Ghostface gave the icicle a brutal twist. I couldn't care less. His breath came heavily as he leaned in close to Shen Wei's face. I don't need to know anything. I can simply bleed you out until you can no longer maintain this human form. Then I can pull Kunlun's tendon out of you and consume you, one mouthful at a time, and ever after. There will be only one king of the Gui in the world. I will truly be unmatched. Agony left Shen Wei unable to speak, but the mocking smile that seemed carved into the corner of his lips was still loud and clear. You're welcome to try. Ghostface pulled the icicle halfway out, only to fiercely thrust it back in. Shen Wei's body convulsed. At long last, he passed out and hung motionless, head dangling limply. In a flash, Ghostface vanished into the endless darkness. That would be the end of the chapter. So, we're on page 235 for chapter 19. Typically, we read on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but you've caught me in about in a special week here. We have streams every day this week. So I will be here tomorrow at the same time, 3 to 5:30ish, however long 60 pages takes instead of 50, so that we can finish Guardian this week. Where are we now? We are straight up halfway through. This is around, we might be a little over halfway. So we're really into the home stretch there. In case it wasn't obvious. All right, I'll be here tomorrow so that we can all hurt our feelings, I'm sure. I hope you had a time. I had a great time. Time at times, but overall a great time. And I will be here tomorrow. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day. I will see you then. Not nervous at all. Not anxious about this at all. Whew. Have a lovely evening. Bye, guys.